Mercedes may have discovered what is killing their car, but the discovery might be even scarier than the failure. Because Antonelli's Silverstone collapse was not just a bad race. It was a warning. A bizarre Mercedes failure. A major title fight blow. Leclerc gaining momentum. Mercedes finally finding the problem after the damage was already done. And now, every rival is asking the same brutal question. Is this car fast, or is it fragile? That is the nightmare for Mercedes. Because a fast car can fight Ferrari. A fast car can fight Red Bull. A fast car can fight McLaren. But a fast car that destroys itself cannot fight anyone. It turns points into excuses. It turns strategy into panic. It turns confidence into doubt. And worst of all, it forces Antonelli to wonder whether the machine underneath him will survive long enough to finish the job. Mercedes can explain a slow lap. They can fix a setup. They can review a strategy. But if the car is being pushed so close to the edge that reliability starts collapsing, then the real enemy is not outside the garage. It is inside the car. A bizarre failure. A hidden weakness. A title fight damaged. A problem finally found. And now the question that could define Mercedes' entire season. Did they really fix what was killing the car, or did Silverstone only expose the beginning of something much bigger? Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Mercedes' discovery after Antonelli's Silverstone collapse feels so dangerous, you have to understand the difference between a car that is slow and a car that cannot be trusted. A slow car is painful, but it is honest. It tells the team where the gap is. Maybe it lacks straight-line speed. Maybe it struggles with tire wear. Maybe it does not rotate well in slow corners. Maybe it loses time in dirty air. Whatever the weakness is, the engineers can measure it, the drivers can describe it, and the team can start building a solution. But a fragile car is different. A fragile car does not only lose lap time. It steals certainty. And certainty is the one thing every Formula One team needs before it can fight properly. Mercedes can build race plans. They can simulate strategy. They can study rivals. They can prepare tire windows, cooling targets, energy deployment, pit stop gaps, and every possible safety car scenario. They can send Antonelli into a Grand Prix with a plan designed down to the smallest detail. But if the car has a hidden weakness inside it, then every plan is built on sand. Because the race only matters if the car survives long enough to finish it. That is why Antonelli's mechanical collapse at Silverstone was not just a painful result. It was a warning to the whole Mercedes operation. The source described it as a bizarre Mercedes failure and a major title fight blow. Those words matter because they tell you this was not being treated like a minor inconvenience. It mattered. It hurt. And it forced Mercedes to find answers after the damage was already done. That is the worst timing for a team. Finding the problem after the race can help the future, but it does not save the lost result. It does not give Antonelli the points back. It does not undo Leclerc's momentum. It does not erase the questions rivals are now asking. And that is the brutal part of Formula One reliability. The lesson often arrives after the cost has already been paid. Mercedes may now understand what went wrong, or at least enough to begin explaining it internally, but Silverstone has already changed the conversation. Before the collapse, the question was whether Antonelli could keep fighting at the front. After the collapse, the question became whether Mercedes could give him a car strong enough to support that fight. That is a much more uncomfortable question. Because it shifts pressure away from the driver and onto the machine. Antonelli can improve. He can adapt. He can learn. He can manage tires better, attack differently, defend with more precision, and sharpen every part of his racecraft. But none of that matters if the car takes the result away before he can use it. That is what makes mechanical failures so cruel. They do not ask whether the driver deserved the result. They simply remove the chance. And for a young driver in a title fight, losing the chance can be almost as damaging as losing the points. Because every race is evidence. Every clean finish proves something. Every pressure moment builds reputation. Every late stint, every defense, every recovery drive, every smart tire phase, every strategic response, all of it helps the paddock understand whether Antonelli belongs in the championship conversation. But a mechanical failure cuts the evidence short. It interrupts the story. Instead of people talking about how Antonelli handled Silverstone, they talk about what Mercedes found. Instead of discussing his pace, they discuss the failure. Instead of asking whether he can beat rivals, they ask whether the car can survive. That is the shift Mercedes cannot afford. Because once a driver becomes surrounded by reliability questions, every race becomes heavier. The driver feels it. The team feels it. Rivals feel it. Fans feel it. And that pressure can spread fast. A normal garage delay becomes suspicious. A changed component becomes a clue. A small radio message becomes something people replay. A cautious instruction becomes a sign that maybe Mercedes is protecting something. A brief loss of pace becomes part of a bigger theory. That is how one failure becomes a narrative. And in Formula One, narratives can become dangerous before the facts are fully public. That is why the mystery around the exact issue matters. The source does not provide a full technical breakdown of the failed part, and that means the responsible version cannot invent a component, a system, or a hidden cause. But the absence of full public detail creates tension all by itself. Because Mercedes may know exactly what happened, but the rest of the paddock does not. And when rivals do not know, they watch. They watch how Mercedes runs the car next time. They watch whether cooling changes. They watch whether the team seems conservative. They watch whether Antonelli sounds fully confident. They watch whether the car is pushed hard in long runs, or protected. They watch whether the same kind of problem appears again under pressure. That is the ruthless intelligence of the paddock. Nobody needs Mercedes to publish the truth if they can collect clues on track. And that is why Mercedes has to be careful. They do not just need to fix the problem. They need to make the fix invisible through confidence. The car has to look normal. The team has to sound calm. Antonelli has to drive freely. The race weekend has to unfold without the kind of strange detail that makes everyone lean forward and ask whether Silverstone is still alive inside the car. Because that is the real fear. Not that the car failed once. That the failure revealed a weakness that can return. A one-off failure is painful, but survivable. Every team has them. A part can fail. A system can behave unexpectedly. A rare combination of conditions can create a result nobody wanted. But if the weakness is connected to how the car is being pushed, how it is packaged, how tight the operating window is, or how little margin Mercedes has left in search of performance, then the problem becomes much bigger. Then it is not just a repair. It is a philosophy question. How close to the edge is Mercedes running? That is the question behind the phrase, killing their car. Because a Formula One car is always a compromise. It is built to live near the limit. Not comfortably below it. Near it. Every piece has to be light enough, strong enough, cool enough, efficient enough, and reliable enough, all while producing the performance needed to fight at the front. But the words "enough" are where the danger lives. Strong enough, until the load is higher than expected. Cool enough, until traffic changes the temperatures. Reliable enough, until a long stint pushes the part beyond the safe window. Aggressive enough, until the car starts paying for performance with fragility. That is where a championship can begin to crack. Not because the team lacks ambition. Because ambition takes margin. And when too much margin is removed, the car can start destroying its own results. That is what Mercedes has to rule out immediately. Was Antonelli's Silverstone failure a strange isolated event, or was it a symptom of a car being run too close to the edge? That question is the first major pressure point. Because if it was isolated, Mercedes can contain the story. They can repair the issue, reassure Antonelli, and move forward. The damage remains, but the fear begins to fade. But if it was a symptom, then every future race becomes a test of whether the deeper weakness is still there. That is the nightmare scenario. A symptom can hide. It can appear only under certain loads, certain temperatures, certain circuits, certain stint lengths, certain traffic conditions, certain vibration patterns, certain combinations of stress that do not always show up when the team wants them to. That is why Formula One reliability problems are so difficult. The car can look fine in the garage, fine in practice, fine over one run, fine until the exact moment the race asks the wrong question. Then suddenly, the weakness appears, and the result is gone. That is what Antonelli cannot afford. He needs a Mercedes that answers the same way every time. He needs a car that does not make him wonder whether the next strange feeling is the beginning of another collapse. He needs confidence that when he fights Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, or anyone else, the car is not the hidden opponent. Because racing at the front is already hard enough. A driver has to manage tires, energy, pressure, track position, changing grip, radio information, and the psychology of rivals. He has to know when to attack and when to protect. He has to read the race while driving at impossible speed. He should not also have to manage suspicion. And that is what Mercedes must remove. Suspicion. The suspicion that the car is fragile. The suspicion that the failure was not fully understood. The suspicion that Silverstone was not just one bad day. The suspicion that the title fight could be damaged again by something outside Antonelli's control. That is why the next clean race is so important. Not just a fast race. A clean race. There is a difference. A fast race proves Mercedes still has performance. A clean race proves Mercedes still has control. After Silverstone, control matters more. The car has to complete long runs without drama. It has to qualify without strange signs. It has to race without hidden anxiety. It has to let Antonelli push, defend, and attack without the team asking him to carry the memory of a mechanical problem in the back of his mind. That is how trust returns. Lap by lap. Not through a statement. Not through a headline. Not through the team saying the problem has been found. The car must prove it. And proof takes repetition. One clean session helps. One clean race helps more. Several clean weekends begin to rebuild the foundation. Eventually, if the issue does not return, the paddock moves on. Rivals stop watching for that specific weakness. The story fades. But until then, Mercedes is under examination. Every race becomes evidence. And Antonelli becomes the person who has to live with that evidence most directly. That is the uncomfortable part. The failure may belong to the car, but the consequences land on the driver. He is the one who loses points. He is the one who faces questions. He is the one who has to return to the cockpit. He is the one whose title fight is affected by something he could not fix with his hands on the wheel. That can be deeply frustrating. Because a driver can accept being beaten by a rival. That is part of racing. He can look at the data, see where the other car was stronger, and come back with a plan. But being beaten by the machine underneath him is different. There is no overtake to analyze. No corner where he simply lost the battle. No rival move he can replay and answer next time. Just a failure. And that is why Mercedes must protect Antonelli mentally as much as technically. They need to give him clarity. They need him to understand what happened, why it happened, and why it will not happen again. They need him to feel that the team is not guessing. They need him to feel that the answer is real. Because if the driver feels the team is uncertain, the uncertainty multiplies. Drivers can hear it in language. They can sense it in radio tone. They can feel it in how the car is prepared. They know when a team is confident, and they know when a team is hoping. Antonelli needs confidence around him. Not hope. Hope is not enough at the front of Formula One. A championship fight requires certainty. And that is what Mercedes must rebuild now. The first major lesson from this story is simple, but brutal. Mercedes' car does not need to be the fastest every weekend to protect Antonelli's title fight. But it absolutely has to finish. Because a car that finishes can limit damage. It can turn a hard weekend into points. It can keep the driver alive in the standings. It can keep rivals under pressure because they know Mercedes will still be there at the end. A car that fails gives the opposition a gift. And gifts are deadly in a title fight. Leclerc's boost after Silverstone shows exactly why. When Mercedes loses control, rivals gain without needing to defeat Antonelli in a clean fight. They simply collect what the failure leaves behind. That is how a championship can slip. One collapse. One missed result. One rival boost. One unanswered question. Then another weekend arrives, and the pressure is bigger than before. That is why Mercedes has to stop this immediately. They cannot let Antonelli's mechanical problems become the season's recurring theme. They cannot let the car become known as fast but fragile. They cannot let every title conversation include the phrase, "if the Mercedes survives." That would be disastrous. Because once a car's reputation changes, the entire competitive environment changes with it. Rivals keep pushing because they believe the car may crack. Strategists take bolder calls because they think Mercedes might be forced to protect. Drivers race Antonelli harder because they sense the team cannot afford more stress. And the media turns every small issue into part of the same story. That is the snowball Mercedes must stop. And the only way to stop it is with performance that survives. Not just speed. Surviving speed. That is the real target. A Mercedes that can run fast without falling apart. A car that can be pushed without turning fragile. A package that gives Antonelli the confidence to attack without wondering whether the result is safe. That is what the discovery has to lead to. Because discovering the problem is not the victory. Solving it is. And proving it is the real finish line. That is why this opening block matters so much. The story is not simply that Mercedes found something after Antonelli's collapse. The story is that the failure exposed the balance every championship team fears. Performance against reliability. Ambition against margin. Speed against survival. Get that balance right, and Mercedes can turn Silverstone into a painful lesson. Get it wrong, and Silverstone becomes the first chapter of a much darker story. A story where Antonelli has the speed to fight, but the car keeps asking whether it can survive the fight. And that is the one question Mercedes cannot allow to define its season.